Now let us get into today's topic, and I want to start with something honest. Something that most people never tell you. Working hard alone will not save you. We have all grown up hearing the same message. Work hard, push harder, never stop. And yes, effort matters. But effort without direction is like running as fast as you can without knowing where you are going. You burn energy. You exhaust yourself. And you end up far from where you actually wanted to be. Today we are going to talk about something deeper and more powerful. Working smart. 6 lessons that will change not just how you work, but how you think, how you rest, how you focus, and ultimately, how you live. Let us begin. Lesson 1. The real truth about hard work. Here is something worth thinking about carefully. 2 people sit down to work. The first person works for 12 hours straight. No breaks, no plan, no clear goal. Just effort. The second person works for 4 hours with a clear strategy, strong focus, and intentional rest between sessions. Who do you think achieves more by the end of the week? Almost always. The second person. Not because they worked longer, but because they worked with purpose. Most of us were never taught this difference. We were taught that long hours equal dedication, that exhaustion equals commitment, that saying yes to everything proves our worth. But here is the quiet truth. The world does not reward the longest hours. It rewards the clearest thinking and the most effective action. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever spent an entire day feeling extremely busy? Answering messages, jumping between tasks, feeling rushed, and then arrived at the end of that day with almost nothing meaningful completed? That feeling is what happens when effort replaces strategy. Busyness replaces progress. Movement replaces direction. Smart work begins with one simple but powerful question. What actually matters here? Not what feels urgent. Not what keeps you occupied, but what genuinely moves you forward. When you can answer that question clearly, your work transforms completely. You stop doing 10 things poorly and start doing 2 or 3 things extraordinarily well. There is also something important about energy that most people overlook entirely. Your energy is not unlimited. It is a finite resource that depletes throughout the day. When your energy is full, your mind is clear, your decisions are sharp, your ideas are alive. But when your energy is drained, even simple problems feel overwhelming. Creativity disappears, and your best work becomes impossible. Smart people treat their energy the way a careful person treats money. They do not spend it carelessly. They do not waste it on arguments that go nowhere, on scrolling endlessly through content that adds nothing, on saying yes to requests that cost more than they return. They protect it. They invest it intentionally into what truly matters. So from this moment, begin asking yourself a new question. Not just, am I working hard enough? But am I working wisely enough? Because hard work builds endurance, but smart work builds the life you actually want. Lesson 2. Build systems, not just effort. Here's a question that reveals a great deal. Are you relying on motivation to drive your work, or are you relying on systems? Most people rely on motivation, and motivation is wonderful when it shows up. But motivation is unreliable. Some mornings you wake up feeling energized and ready. Other mornings everything feels heavy and difficult, and the last thing you want to do is work. If motivation is your only engine, your progress will always be inconsistent. Smart people build systems instead. A system is a repeatable structure that removes the need for constant decision-making and willpower. When your work follows a consistent system, you no longer have to convince yourself to begin. The routine carries you forward automatically. Think of it this way. A person who decides every morning whether to exercise will skip many days. But a person who has decided that every morning at 7 they put on their shoes and walk, that person exercises consistently without negotiating with themselves each day. The decision was already made. The system handles the rest. The same principle applies to any meaningful goal. If you are building a business, learning a language, creating content, or developing a skill, design a system around it. Assign specific days or time blocks to specific tasks. Reduce the number of decisions you need to make in the moment. When your structure is reliable, your output becomes reliable too. There is also a principle that smart workers understand deeply: the idea that not all tasks carry equal value. Some actions produce enormous results. Others produce very little despite consuming a great deal of time and energy. Wise people identify which actions belong to which category and protect their best hours for the ones that matter most. Delegation is part of this too. Many people resist asking for help because they believe doing everything themselves proves strength or dedication. But trying to carry everything alone is not strength. It is an unnecessary burden that slows you down. When you allow others to handle what they do well, you free yourself to do what only you can do. That is not laziness. That is intelligence applied to your time. And finally, reflect regularly. Every week, set aside a few quiet minutes to honestly review what worked, what wasted your time, and what you want to do differently going forward. This habit of reflection is one of the most underused tools in personal growth. It keeps your strategy sharp and your direction honest. Without it, you risk repeating the same patterns endlessly without ever noticing. Lesson 3. Guard your time like your life depends on it. Let us talk about something that almost nobody treats with the seriousness it deserves: time. Not time management in the traditional sense of schedules and calendars, but the deeper understanding that time is not just a resource. Time is your life, expressed in hours. Every minute you spend is a minute of your actual existence on this earth. It cannot be stored. It cannot be borrowed. And once it passes, it is gone with complete permanence. When you truly absorb that truth, your relationship with how you spend your hours changes entirely. Many hardworking people remain stuck in the same place year after year, not because they lack effort or intelligence, but because they allow their time to leak away quietly and constantly. A few hours lost to mindless scrolling. An hour spent in a conversation that drained rather than built. An afternoon consumed by tasks that felt productive but moved nothing forward. Individually, each of these seems small. Accumulated across weeks and months, they represent an enormous portion of a life. Begin asking yourself honestly throughout each day: is this taking me closer to where I want to be or further away? That single question, asked regularly and answered honestly, has the power to completely redirect a life. There are also what we might call energy thieves, and they are worth identifying clearly. These are not always people, though sometimes they are. Energy thieves are anything that quietly drains your focus and motivation without giving anything back in return. Constant negative conversations. The habit of overthinking what other people think of you. switching rapidly between tasks without completing any of them. The pull of notifications breaking your concentration every few minutes. The toxic habit of measuring your own progress against someone else's highlight reel. Each of these creates small but consistent drains. And like water leaking slowly from a container, the effect compounds over time until you find yourself exhausted without a clear reason why. Learning to say no is one of the most powerful skills a person can develop, and one of the least comfortable. Many people fill their days with obligations that serve other people's priorities rather than their own because saying no feels selfish or unkind. But consider the other side of that equation. Every time you say yes to something that does not align with your growth, you are simultaneously saying no to something that does. Your time is always going somewhere. The only question is whether you are choosing where it goes or allowing others to choose for you. The way you structure your day also matters enormously. Your mind is not equally capable at all hours. Most people do their sharpest, most creative, most important thinking in the first few hours after they are fully awake. Using those hours for emails, social media, or low-priority tasks is one of the most costly mistakes a person can make without realizing it. Reserve your best mental hours for your most important work. Handle lighter tasks when your energy naturally dips. Rest deliberately rather than waiting until you collapse. And protect your mind as actively as you protect your time. Because a mind full of noise, comparison, resentment, or chronic stress cannot produce its best work regardless of how many hours it sits in front of a task. Mental clarity is not a luxury. It is the foundation that every other form of smart work is built upon. Lesson 4. Rest is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. We need to talk honestly about rest, because the conversation around it is almost always missing something important. Rest has developed a reputation problem. In many cultures and communities, rest is quietly associated with weakness, laziness, or falling behind. The person who sleeps less and works more is admired. The person who takes a full day off is sometimes viewed with suspicion. But this understanding is not just wrong. It is genuinely harmful. The human brain is extraordinarily capable, but it is not designed for continuous uninterrupted output. It has natural rhythms of focus and recovery, activity and restoration. When you work without honoring those rhythms, you are not being more productive. You are gradually depleting the very resource that makes productivity possible. Think about what actually happens to your thinking after many hours without meaningful rest. Decisions become slower and less reliable. Creative connections stop forming as readily. Small irritations become larger ones. The work that once felt engaging begins to feel heavy and joyless. These are not signs of weakness or lack of commitment. They are the brain communicating a clear and simple message. It needs to recover. What many people do not realize is that rest is not simply the absence of work. Rest is an active process during which some of the brain's most valuable work actually happens. During genuine rest, a walk, a quiet moment, a good night of sleep, the mind processes information gathered during focused work, forms connections between ideas, consolidates learning, and generates the kind of creative insight that hours of staring at a screen rarely produce. Some of the most important realizations you will ever have will arrive not while you are working hard, but during a moment of genuine stillness. This means that protecting your rest is not stepping away from success. It is a direct investment in the quality of everything you produce when you return to work. There are also different kinds of rest worth understanding, because not all exhaustion comes from the same place. Physical tiredness is the most obvious. The body needs sleep, movement, and recovery from sustained effort. But there is also mental exhaustion, which comes from prolonged concentration, constant decision-making, and information overload. There is emotional exhaustion, which grows from difficult relationships, conflict, and carrying other people's stress. And there is creative exhaustion, which happens when the mind has been producing without receiving, when you have been giving out without taking anything meaningful in. Each of these requires a slightly different kind of recovery. Physical rest restores the body. Mental rest comes from stepping away from screens and complexity. Emotional rest sometimes requires solitude and quiet. Creative rest comes from experiencing something beautiful, inspiring, or genuinely new. The wisest approach is to build rest into your life intentionally, rather than treating it as something you earn only after you have pushed yourself to the edge of your capacity. Short breaks woven into focused work sessions. A portion of each day genuinely protected from productivity pressure. One day each week that belongs to restoration rather than output. These are not indulgences. They are the architecture of sustainable high performance. And perhaps most importantly, learn to rest without guilt. The feeling that you should always be doing something more is one of the most common and quietly destructive thought patterns in modern life. It keeps people in a constant state of low-level anxiety, unable to truly recover even when they are technically resting because their mind remains locked in the tension of feeling unproductive. True rest requires permission. Give yourself that permission not as a reward for enough effort, but as a recognition of what makes continued effort possible. Lesson 5. Focus and consistency. The two things that actually build a life. Of all the qualities that separate people who gradually build something meaningful from people who remain exactly where they started, focus and consistency stand above almost everything else. Not talent, not intelligence, not even opportunity. Focus and consistency. Focus, in the deepest sense, is the ability to give your full attention and energy to one thing at a time, to resist the pull of distraction, the temptation of novelty, and the anxiety of feeling like you should be doing something else. In an era defined by constant interruption, genuine deep focus has become genuinely rare. And because it is rare, it has become enormously valuable. Most people today live in a state of divided attention. They work while monitoring notifications. They think about the next task while still in the middle of the current one. They consume content while half listening to a conversation. This fragmentation feels normal because it is common. But common is not the same as effective. A mind that is always partially elsewhere is never fully anywhere, and it shows in the quality of what it produces. When you train yourself to focus completely, to give one task your full and undivided attention for a sustained period, something genuinely different happens. Your thinking deepens. Connections form that scattered attention never produces. The work becomes better, and paradoxically, it often takes less time because you are not constantly restarting and reorienting yourself after each interruption. Building this capacity takes deliberate practice. It means creating an environment that supports concentration rather than constantly undermining it. It means putting the phone away during work sessions rather than keeping it within reach as a constant temptation. It means closing unnecessary tabs, reducing ambient noise, and protecting your most focused hours from meetings, messages, and minor requests. These are small changes individually, but collectively, they create the conditions where real, deep, meaningful work becomes possible. Consistency is the companion that makes focus compound over time. You can have perfect focus for one day and accomplish something genuinely impressive. But one impressive day, disconnected from the days before and after it, leaves very little lasting trace. It is the person who shows up with reasonable focus every single day, even the difficult ones, even the uninspired ones, even the ones where everything feels slightly harder than it should, who builds something that endures. The mathematics of consistency are quietly extraordinary. One focused hour of learning every day becomes over 360 hours in a year. One meaningful creative output every week becomes more than 50 across a year. One small financial decision made consistently across decades builds something that would be impossible to create in any single moment of effort. Small things, done reliably and repeatedly, accumulate into large things. This is not motivational language. It is simply how compound growth works. The challenge is that consistency requires showing up when you do not feel like it. And there will be many such days. Days when motivation is completely absent. Days when progress feels invisible. Days when the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels discouraging rather than inspiring. These are the days that ultimately determine everything. Not the days when you feel energized and excited and everything flows easily. Anyone can show up on the good days. The person who also shows up on the hard days is the one who eventually arrives somewhere remarkable. Build your consistency on structure rather than feeling. Decide in advance when you will do your important work and treat that commitment as non-negotiable. Track your progress in some simple, visible way so that your accumulation becomes something you can see rather than just believe in. Forgive yourself completely when you miss a day, not by abandoning the habit, but by returning to it the very next opportunity without drama or excessive self-criticism. And celebrate the quiet wins along the way. Because the journey toward any meaningful goal is long, and sustaining energy across that journey requires noticing and appreciating the progress you have already made. When focus and consistency work together, they create something that looks to outside observers like exceptional talent or remarkable luck. But it is neither. It is simply the compound result of clear attention applied reliably over time. Lesson 6. What success actually means: purpose, peace, and living well. We have arrived at the final lesson, and in many ways it is the most important one. Because everything we have discussed, smart work, strong systems, protected time, intentional rest, deep focus, reliable consistency, all of it serves a larger question. A question that surprisingly few people ask themselves clearly and honestly. What is success actually for? The conventional answer is well known. Success means money, recognition, status, achievement, and visible accomplishment. These things are not worthless. Financial security genuinely matters. Meaningful achievement genuinely matters. But here is what the conventional picture of success leaves out. It is entirely possible to acquire all of those things and still feel profoundly empty. Still feel that something essential is missing. Still lie awake at night with an unquiet mind despite every external marker of having made it. The missing ingredient is almost never more achievement. It is almost always purpose and peace. Purpose is the reason beneath your effort. It is the answer to the question, why does this actually matter to me? Not why it impresses other people, not why it meets someone else's definition of a valuable life, but why it genuinely connects to something you care about deeply. When purpose is present, work feels different. Difficulty feels manageable rather than demoralizing. Setbacks feel like information rather than verdicts. The process itself carries meaning, not just the destination. Without purpose, even genuine success can feel hollow. You climb the ladder and discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. You reach the goal and feel a strange flatness rather than the fulfillment you expected. This is not unusual. It is what happens when achievement is disconnected from meaning. The solution is not to achieve less. It is to connect your effort to something that genuinely matters to you. Something that would still feel worth pursuing even if no one were watching and no one were applauding. Peace is the other essential element, and it is perhaps the most undervalued quality in conversations about success. Peace is not the absence of challenge or difficulty. Life will always contain both. Peace is the inner steadiness that allows you to meet challenge without being destabilized by it. It is the ability to be present in your own life rather than constantly anxious about the future or burdened by the past. It is the freedom from needing to compare your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Peace also comes from acceptance, not passive resignation, but the active understanding of what is within your control and what is not. You can control your effort, your attitude, your choices, and your response to what happens. You cannot control outcomes, other people's perceptions, or the pace at which results arrive. Trying to control what cannot be controlled is one of the most reliable sources of chronic stress and unhappiness. Releasing that need does not weaken your ambition. It frees the energy that was being consumed by anxiety and redirects it towards something genuinely productive. True power in life does not come from external position or accumulated resources. It comes from inner clarity, self-discipline, and the ability to act from your values rather than from fear or reactivity. A person who can remain calm under pressure, think clearly in difficulty, and make choices aligned with their deeper purpose. That person carries a kind of power that no title or salary can create or remove. Bring all of this together, and the picture of a genuinely successful life looks something like this. Work that carries meaning, effort that is directed wisely and sustainably, relationships that are nourished with real presence and care, health that is protected as the foundation everything else depends on, and a consistent inner orientation toward gratitude, growth, and peace. This is not a perfect life. There is no such thing. It is a balanced life. One where the external achievements and the internal experience are both genuinely worth having. The final truth worth carrying from today is this: you do not need to prove anything to anyone. You need to grow, steadily, honestly, and in a direction that actually matters to you. You do not need to be the busiest person in the room. You need to be the clearest. You do not need to outrun everyone around you. You need to keep moving in your own right direction, at your own honest pace, with your own genuine purpose lighting the way. Work smart, rest well, focus deeply, stay consistent, live with purpose, protect your peace, and trust that a life built on those foundations will become something genuinely worth having. Not just in the moments when everything goes well, but in the long, full, real experience of being alive. That is everything for today's lesson, and I hope something in these 6 lessons landed in a way that stays with you. If you watch this entire video, you should feel proud of yourself, because you just invested real time in both your English and your thinking. That is exactly what this channel is here for. If this video helped you in any way, give it a like. It takes 1 second and it genuinely helps more English learners around the world find this content. If you are new here, welcome. This is Read and Learn English. Every video on this channel is designed to grow your English vocabulary, sharpen your listening skills, and give you something genuinely meaningful to think about at the same time. Subscribe now and join a community of learners who are building better English and better lives together. And if someone in your life is learning English right now, share this video with them today, because the best learning is always better when shared. I will see you in the next lesson. Keep reading, keep learning, and keep growing. Take care.